My marriage with Lao Zhao was, like many others from the 1960s and 70s, rather formulaic. Introduced through a matchmaker, we decided neither of us was particularly undesirable, got married, had kids, occasionally quarreled over trivial matters, and just like that, a lifetime passed. What is happiness? Before Lao Zhao passed away, I never really pondered this question. Lao Air Lao Si, tomorrow Hong Yan and I are leaving. You two will take turns bringing mom to your homes to care for her. This is non-negotiable. Eldest sister, mom always complains about how talkative my wife is. And mom has a strong personality. If they're in the same house, they'll be arguing from dawn till dusk. Let mom stay with big brother instead. I'm the eldest son, so it's my duty to take care of mom until the end. But since I'm doing it, don't come up with excuses to keep borrowing money from her. When did I ever borrow money from mom? She offered it to us because she saw we were struggling. Besides, you've taken your fair share too. That last remark was like igniting a powder keg. The bickering grew louder and louder. Enough, all of you, Hong Xia, the eldest daughter, roared. Dad's only been gone a few days. Do you want to drive mom to her grave too? I closed the door softly and walked slowly back to sit on my bed. I live on the second floor, and they're in the living room downstairs arguing. If I were truly half deaf and half blind, I wouldn't have heard a thing. Being old invites resentment. This much holds true for most people. If I had passed away before Lao Zhao, the two sons would probably have fought over who got to take care of him, since he had a pension. I was a factory worker too, but when the garment factory underwent restructuring in the 1990s, I was laid off. I relied on my tailoring skills to open a shop, but as my eyesight deteriorated in recent years, I had to shut it down. Now that Lao Zhao is gone, I'm just an old widow living off her savings. It's no wonder my sons find me burdensome. As parents, we know exactly what kind of people our children are. No matter how good a daughter is, once she's married, her allegiance shifts. After my youngest, Hong Bing, got married, he stopped taking Hong Xia's words seriously. The more she scolded him, the louder he argued. By the end, the argument had escalated to sending me to live with Hong Jun, the second son, and how to split the money from selling this old house. Years ago, there were talks about urban redevelopment. The old houses here were supposed to make way for new commercial buildings. Many families got their hopes up, dreaming of becoming rich overnight. But when too many people made demands, the developers backed off, and the redevelopment plan ended up as a pile of discarded paperwork. In recent years, real estate developers have focused on the eastern part of the city, leaving this small area entirely forgotten. Still, if we were to sell this house along with the yard, it could fetch over $1 million yuan. Compared to an elderly woman in need of care, money is, of course, more valuable. I sighed, turned off the light, and lay down, stuffing 2 cotton balls in my ears. For a fleeting moment, I wondered if life was even worth continuing. Maybe it'd be better to end it all and join Lao Zhao. But upon reflection, I realized I'd never really lived for myself. I'd worked hard to raise 4 children, seen them all married with kids of their own, and now even worried about my grandchildren. When Lao Zhao was alive, he often said, "Times are different now. Hong Jun isn't the sharpest, and making a living isn't easy for him. As for Hong Bing, he likes to be clever but lacks patience. He'll only find it harder in the future. We're getting old. Let's help where we can." Though he mostly talked about our 2 sons, Lao Zhao wasn't the type to favor boys over girls. When Hong Xia and Hong Yan came to visit, he'd quietly ask me to give them money too. Hong Xia is just like me, stubborn. She refused 9 out of 10 times, even stuffing the money back under my pillow. The remaining times, I had to insist and give it directly to her daughter. "Mom, don't be like Dad, foolishly generous with whatever you've saved. At least keep enough for yourself for a proper burial. If Dad goes before you, can you really count on Hong Jun and Hong Bing to give you money?" I never thought those words would become prophecy. The coffin fund? The thought jolted me awake, and I nearly wrenched my back as I sat up in bed. I turned on the light, rummaged for the accounting notebook, and put on my reading glasses. Grabbing a pen, I started calculating. Old Xiao may be gone, but his unit leader mentioned at the wake that they'd follow standard procedure and supplement his pension for 6 months. The money would be deposited into old Zhao's account soon. That's over 30,000 yuan, not a small sum for me. Coupled with the condolence money from his workplace, it added up to more than 50,000. Including our savings, set aside for emergencies like hospital stays, I figured the total to be around 100,000. Maybe old Zhao had a premonition. Last month, he explicitly told me to keep the money for myself. The kids are all married now, he had said. What kind of lives they lead isn't something we, as parents, can control forever. Once we're gone, let Hongjun and Hongbing fight over the inheritance. They can tear the house apart for all I care. We won't be around to see it. He left so suddenly, yet so unburdened. Just the night before, he was grumbling and glaring, berating Hongbing for wanting to buy a new car to start a rideshare business. A harebrained scheme, he had fumed. Who would have thought he'd never wake up again after going to bed that night? The words on my notebook blurred. I wiped the corner of my eye. Old Zhao, don't blame me for not prioritizing the kids. I just want to make sure I'll always have a place where I can sleep peacefully. After a fitful night, I woke to find Hongxia announcing she was leaving. There's something urgent at home, she said, suggesting Hongyan should ride back with her. Hongyan looked reluctant, but didn't object. The two brothers, Hongjun and Hongbing, both wore sullen expressions. Last night, they'd argued late into the night but hadn't reached any agreement. Everyone was stewing with frustration. I glanced at my feuding children and let out a cold snort. No matter how rushed you are, it won't kill you to stay for breakfast. I have something to say afterward. Hongbing's wife plastered on a smile. Mom, big sister's been here for several days already. Her husband might have a good temper, but they still need to consider her in-laws' opinions. I knew exactly what she was angling for. I decided to cut straight to the chase. Fine, let's divvy up the condolence money. Those who want to leave can do so sooner. Old Zhao had bought burial plots for the both of us 2 years ago. However, funerals cost money. Each of the 4 kids had contributed 15,000 yuan, leaving a balance of just over 9,000. After deducting the condolence money from old Zhao's workplace, 34,000 yuan remained. I planned to divide these two sums. Hongxia's eyes widened. Mom, why split the condolence money? You should keep it for yourself. You don't even have a pension. She's right. Hongjuan's wife chimed in. Mom, how can we take this money? It's yours to keep. Of course you're saying that, Hongyan sneered, because you and big sister don't want to split it. She grabbed Hongxia's arm and headed toward the door, throwing one last remark over her shoulder. Mom, make sure to keep the money safe. Don't give it away to anyone crying poverty. Hongbing kicked over a stool. Zhao Hongyan, who do you think you're insulting? His wife, puffed up with anger, shot back that Hongyan was playing the righteous one while slinging mud at them. The couple erupted into a shouting match with Hongjun and his wife. Watching the scene spiral into chaos, my heart sank. Old Zhao had barely been gone, and already our 2 sons couldn't be bothered to keep up appearances. I walked to the courtyard and flung open the main gate. Hongjun, Hongbing, if you want to argue, do it outside. Fine, we'll leave. Hongjun turned as if to storm off, but his wife yanked him back. Clearly, she feared leaving would mean losing out on the money. Finally, silence. I had sorted out the finances last night, dividing everything evenly into 4 shares. The condolence money from old Zhao's workplace isn't up for grabs. What's left is all here. I rounded it off, 11,000 yuan per family. Hongxia and Hongyan refused to take their shares, but I threatened to disown them if they didn't. Only then did they grudgingly accept. The 2 brothers were less than thrilled, but I wasn't about to indulge them this time. I'm not expecting any of you to take care of me. I'll live alone, and when the time comes that I can't walk anymore, I'll check myself into a nursing home. I had made up my mind. No amount of persuasion would change it. Every few days, Hongjuan's wife would visit, often in the evenings. She'd see me folding laundry, bed linens, and sofa covers, and would rush to help. "Mom, I told you, let me know if you need to wash big items." I smiled. "The washing machine does all the work. No need to trouble you. You've got jobs and kids to take care of. Don't worry about the small stuff." Speaking of the kids, my eldest grandson had just gotten into college. I couldn't help but ask how he was adapting, worried about him being away from home for the first time. Hongjun's wife beamed with pride, chatting at length about him before sighing. Even though Xiaohai never mentions money when he calls, his dad and I know the 500 yuan we send him each month isn't enough for proper meals. But what can we do? Xiaojun is still in school too, and her grades aren't as good as her brother's. If she wants to get into a decent college, we have to spend on tutoring. Our shop isn't doing great either. A new supermarket opened nearby, pulling all sorts of tricks to steal our customers. Total scam artists. I couldn't help correcting her. That's marketing, not scamming. Don't go around mislabeling things. She brushed off my comment. Whatever they call it, it's underhanded. The boss lady is so flashy. No good comes from people like her. Her gossip grew more animated, but I cut her off. Careless talk leads to trouble. Fine, I'll stop, she muttered, setting down the folded linens. By the way, Mom, I heard Dad's workplace supplemented his pension? I stared her down. When have I ever been careless with money, whether your father was alive or not? Caught off guard, she stammered. Mom, I didn't mean it that way. I'm just worried about you being scammed by those fake health product schemes. Money is one thing, but what if you took something harmful? I chuckled. Relax. I steer clear of freebies and crowds. As the old saying goes, when a weasel pays a New Year's visit to a hen, it's never with good intentions. Her face darkened, and she stood abruptly. Mom, I'll leave now. Hongjun has a delivery tonight, so I need to watch the shop. She had barely left when Hongbing's son came bouncing in. Grandma, Mom went to my other grandma's place and said she'll be gone for a few days. Can you stay at our house? Dad doesn't look after us when he drinks. That no-good drunk. Last time he got drunk, his wife scratched up his face, but he still hadn't learned his lesson. I waved off my anger and asked the boy, Have you eaten? Where's Ying? Is she home alone? He shook his head, then nodded. Dad bought us a family bucket for dinner and told me to come here after I finished. He left after that. I felt like wringing Hongbing's neck. What could possibly be more important than his kids? But I wasn't about to move into his place. I can't stand the boxed-in feeling of apartments, like being locked up. Instead, I told the boy to watch TV in the living room, then went to fetch Ying and pack some clothes and her school bag. On the way back, I called Hongbing, giving him an earful before announcing, I'll take care of the kids for now. When your wife's back, we'll talk. A few days later, Hongjun's wife told me, Mom, there was nothing wrong at the younger sister's family. She's just making up an excuse, so you can look after the kids for free. As someone who's been through these kinds of family dramas, I knew better than to get involved in their arguments. I asked around. Her workplace, the supermarket, has been closed for renovations, so everyone is on leave. Whether she's going back to her family for a while or looking for a new job, she'll come back eventually. Hongjun's wife scoffed. You're at this age, and you don't even ride an electric bike. You're helping to pick up and drop off the grandkids every day. What if you suddenly feel dizzy and fall on the road? Hongbin and his wife would have to be by your bedside taking care of you. I sighed. Mayfin, when it comes to helping with the kids, didn't you and your husband raise both of your children? When it was Hongbin and his wife's turn, we were already older and didn't have the energy to help like we did before. And they didn't force us to give them money, did they? Old Zhao and I always try to treat all 4 of our kids fairly, but you can't really be fair to everyone, just like how not all 5 fingers are the same length. Though Hongbin didn't have much to his name, his wife had complained twice about the unfairness of child-rearing duties, both times with Hongbin shutting her down, forbidding any further arguments. Because of this, old Zhao and I felt we owed them something, so we gave them 40,000 yuan. They didn't force us, but you and Dad still gave money. Hongjun's wife tried to use that to silence me. In the past, I had complained about the younger daughter-in-law's chatter, how she always knew how to hit a nerve. Now, it seemed this eldest daughter-in-law wasn't much better. In the end, it all came down to that small inheritance of mine. Our money is ours to give however we like. I grabbed her arm and pushed her out the door. Go back to your store. If I die, come to visit if you're in the mood. If not, don't step foot in this house again. Honestly, if their lives were really so difficult that they had to meticulously calculate every meal at the market, wondering whether they could even buy half a pound of meat, I would have no hesitation in finding a way to get by, even if it meant scrounging through garbage to make a few cents. I wouldn't be so tight-fisted with that few tens of thousands of yuan. Hongjun and Hongbin's families weren't rich, but they certainly weren't poor either. They owned houses and cars and had their own business. I had helped them buy their wedding home, without any loans, and had given them occasional financial help over the years. Now, they were coming after my little savings, and I began to regret giving them so much in the past. When I suddenly stopped giving, I became the wicked mother-in-law. When Hongbin's wife came to pick up the kids, she said in front of them, "Mom, the supermarket is reopening, but they've let go of a lot of staff. I lost my job. You know how Hongbin is. Could you lend us some money to get by?" Ying, confused, looked at me, and Liang tugged at my clothes, saying in a high-pitched voice, "Grandma, Mommy says you have a lot of money. If you don't give it to us, the bad old man will steal it all." Is this something a 6-year-old would come up with? Shaking with anger, I pointed at Hongbin's wife. "Get out. Even if I die and stink up this house, I don't want you here." She glared at me, ready to argue, but I shot back, "If you argue again, I'll take the money and buy insurance, then sell the house and give everything to outsiders as charity." She knew my temper, so she finally backed off, saying a few polite words and quickly taking the kids away. I sat alone in the yard, staring at the old pomegranate tree. Winter was approaching, and its leaves were scattered and hung loosely on the branches. A gust of wind came through, and they fell to the ground in a rustling heap. This old tree used to bear fruit in abundance, but no one remembered or could find the pomegranates that belonged to it. Not long after, when I approached the fitness square, old Huang approached me with a big smile. "Xiaoying, I haven't seen you around lately. I thought you weren't feeling well, but I heard you've been busy looking after the grandkids." I nodded quietly in response. He didn't stop there. They've switched the dance routine recently. "I'll teach you so you don't get left behind," feeling embarrassed standing in the back. I waved my hand. "I'm not dancing anymore. I'm fine with just walking a few laps." A few elderly people in the distance were stretching, but their eyes kept darting toward us, pretending not to notice. It suddenly hit me why my 2 daughters-in-law were so persistent. Old Huang was a lonely old man. He used to get along well with old Zhao, and after old Zhao passed, he would occasionally invite me over, worried that I might sink into despair. I had heard he wanted to find a companion for his later years. Though we didn't speak much, our interactions had increased since he visited me. However, I had never thought much of it, not even exchanging phone numbers. Now it seemed that, regardless of age, if an old man and woman were alone, there would inevitably be gossip and speculation. Since that day, I stopped going to the fitness square. If I bumped into familiar people, I only exchanged a brief greeting unless they were a married couple. Liang and Ying hadn't come for a while. Neither had the 2 daughters-in-law. Only Hongjun and Hongbin occasionally came by or called me. Hongxia had moved far away and was about to become a grandmother, so she had to help her daughter-in-law, but she never missed a phone call every day. Hongyan's mother-in-law was difficult to get along with and had a strong sense of pride. She worried that if she visited too often, outsiders would think they were mistreating their daughter-in-law or forcing her to ask for things. The 2 of them argued about this frequently. Now that old Zhao was gone, even though I tasted the bitterness of loneliness every day, I didn't want my 2 daughters-in-law to come around too often, or else they'd argue even more. I didn't have much education, so I wasn't sure where the fault lay in my relationship with my daughters-in-law. But I thought to myself, even if I had nothing left, the conflict would still be there. How many daughters-in-law would truly take care of a poor mother-in-law? If you can't rely on your sons, can you expect anything from your daughters-in-law? One evening, when Hongxia called, she started complaining about her daughter-in-law wanting to stay in a confinement center and hire a nanny. Mom, you wouldn't believe how expensive those places are. And the nannies, they charge 3,500 yuan for room and board, but the young ones don't understand budgeting at all. Can I take care of my own grandchildren properly? Why do they trust strangers but not me? She went on and on complaining. She thought that ever since her daughter-in-law entered the family, she had been patient, trying to be a good mother-in-law. Her daughter-in-law had said that young people don't like their parents arranging their lives, so Hongxia tried to avoid intruding. Her daughter-in-law loved seafood, so every time they came home, Hongxia would buy fresh seafood in advance, even rejecting frozen ones. Hongxia wanted to hold her grandchildren, but her daughter-in-law said she was too busy with work, so Hongxia didn't pressure her. Now that her daughter-in-law was finally willing to have children, they ended up arguing over the issue of hiring a nanny for the confinement. Hongxia started to cry when she got to the end of her words. I can understand. Given her temperament, if it were someone else, they'd probably have hit her by now. Hongxia, to put it in the words of today's young people, the generation gap between two generations can't ever be completely filled. As a mother-in-law, you've done well, but Xiao Jia is a doctor, so she certainly understands the pros and cons of hiring a confinement nanny. Think about it from another angle. Xiao Jia insists on hiring a nanny at the confinement center. Isn't it a good thing that you can relax? If it makes you uncomfortable, then help out financially and ease the pressure on the young couple. She just despises me, Hongxia said angrily. She's a doctor and has obsessive cleanliness. I try my best to accommodate her. Every time she comes home, I clean the house from top to bottom, and when I talk to her, I even wish I could brush my teeth first. Is that easy for me? I couldn't help but laugh, but at the same time, I felt heartbroken. Being a mother-in-law isn't easy either. You don't need to force yourself to do all this. Over time, you'll just end up resenting Xiao Jia. Young people have their own way of living. If you force yourself into their life, neither side will feel comfortable. Hongxia still wasn't convinced. So, if I want to hold my grandson in the future, do I have to wait for Xiao Jia's approval? I sighed. When you gave birth to Mingyang, you were already so frustrated with raising a son that you said you'd never take care of babies again. Why are you bothered by this now? I just want a grandson. A granddaughter would be fine too. Hongxia's tone softened. Xiao Jia explained. It's not that she's worried I can't take care of the baby, but that she's concerned about my age. If I fall or something happens, whether it's me or the baby, it'd cause trouble for everyone. Actually, Xiao Jia is a really good person. She's generous and straightforward in her dealings. The only thing people find hard to accept might be her cleanliness obsession. But everyone has their quirks. She probably also has things she finds hard to tolerate, and when interacting with Hongxia, she might have held her temper. There's no clear right or wrong. Relationships aren't about who steps back first. Sometimes things just clash. It seems like Hongxia came to terms with it. At the granddaughter's full-month banquet, I could see she was genuinely happy. She and Xiao Jia were laughing and chatting, neither of them feeling forced. It's good. People used to say that having many children and grandchildren is a blessing. But now, I think having just one might save a lot of trouble. Hongjun had a few drinks and came over to find me, his face red, saying that my living alone was embarrassing for the son. Mom, why don't you divide the money and sell the old house? Once it's all divided, come live with us. If Mayfin dares to complain, I'll deal with her. Enough. Stop it. I slapped him on the shoulder. Don't think that after drinking a little you can forget who you are. Mayfin has worked hard these years. It's natural for her to want my little bit of money. Hongjun opened his mouth, but felt embarrassed to criticize his wife. He just smiled awkwardly and continued. Yesterday, she called Xiao Hai and talked about what's been happening recently. Xiao Hai lectured her. Xiao Hai was right. The money your dad and I earned is ours. How we spend it isn't up to our children. You've both helped us a lot over the years. People should know when to be content and grateful, especially since you're my own mom. He talked about Xiao Hai and then mentioned Hongxia and her siblings. Before they got married, their relationship was great, especially with Hongxia, the eldest, who always thought of her younger brothers and sisters. When my husband and I were not very satisfied with Meifan and hoped Hongjun would marry a gentler woman, Hongxia firmly disagreed. She said Hongjun needed a sharp-tongued, strong-willed woman, or else he'd be bullied. Usually, Hongjun would never talk much, but tonight, under the influence of alcohol, he went on and on, his eyes red. People's hearts are made of flesh, and every parent hopes their children will be by their side when they grow old, knowing their needs and taking care of them. But when the eldest daughter-in-law gets a few words of advice from her son, and her attitude towards me changes drastically, I can't believe she'll truly take care of me as a mother in the future. At my age, if I still can't see the true nature of those around me, then I've wasted decades of my life. Sure enough, one night, I followed Red Army for a while and overheard my daughter-in-law, eager to know the outcome, calling him. Mom didn't agree to live with us, and she didn't even mention the house. I told you it wouldn't work, but you insisted on making a big deal out of it. I won't do this again, next time. Red Army cursed, hung up, and muttered a few complaints about me. It was all about how I was becoming more muddled, not treating him as the eldest son, and how I was turning my back on him. I hobbled home, feeling the weight of the situation. Once sons marry, their role as a husband changes everything. Whether gentle or harsh, in the end, what they care about is how much money I have and how the house will be divided. Now I've come to a conclusion. Instead of letting them worry and speculate, it's better to make it clear in black and white. All 4 children, including their spouses, will have a share. I'm an old woman with no pension and not much money. The only thing that might interest them is this house. When I die, whether they sell the house or whoever comes to live here, all 4 families will have a share. Although Hongxia and Hongyan are married out, they've never complained about me and my husband, but when things arise, they still turn to the 2 sons. Therefore, the 2 daughters will each get 20%, and the sons will each get 30%. As for when I die, no matter how much is left in my pocket, it will be evenly split between the 2 sons. Hongbing's wife rolled her eyes. Mom, whose old house is left to the sons. If you let the eldest and second sisters come back and divide it, aren't you worried about what people will say? I don't mind if it's divided this way, even if it's split evenly, Red Army's wife smiled. Since the inheritance is being split fairly, taking care of the elderly should be fair too. She smiled at me and said, Mom, if you're ever unwell and need care, we'll take turns, and no one should make excuses. Medical expenses should be shared equally too. Red Army's head was bowed, either in shame or anger. Hongxia snorted. Sister-in-law, I'm not fighting with you over the house. Don't try to use fairness to criticize others. Just care for Mom more seriously. Hongyan was more straightforward. Forget it, I don't want the house. Mom, since you only want to live in the old house, we'll find you a nurse and we'll all share the cost. That's a good idea. Hongxia slapped her thigh. Find someone around the same age who can take good care of Mom and chat with her. Hongbing jumped up angrily. Big sister, if you have money and nowhere to spend it, don't drag me into this. I don't mind taking care of Mom, but I can't afford a nurse. The eldest son-in-law tried to calm him down, then turned to me and said, Mom, none of us are rich and no one will mind a little extra. But we can't just keep opening our pockets. We can't take the house, and we're already feeling guilty for not being able to care for you more often. The second son-in-law also said he didn't want the house, received a call, and said he had to rush back for an emergency meeting. After he left, the eldest son-in-law, feeling awkward, also found an excuse to leave. In the eyes of Red Army and Hongbing, now that the outsider has left, they could finally argue their points more boldly. Mom, if you want to divide the house, fine, but don't always look to me when something happens, Red Army said, grumbling. Hongbing folded his arms and crossed his legs. Mom, you're getting old and confused. Even if you're dividing the inheritance between the eldest and second sisters, there's no need to say it in front of outsiders. Do you think that once the money is in their hands, it's really theirs? I felt irritated. I've already made up my mind. This is how I'll divide it. I looked at Hongxia and Hongyan. You two don't need to say you don't want it. After I'm gone, if you want to give it to Red Army and them, I won't interfere. Red Army suddenly stood up. As he walked to the door, he didn't look back. Mom, Big Sis, and Hongyan are both public servants. When they grow old, their children won't burden them much. He smiled and continued. I'm different from Hongbing. We two brothers didn't study well back then, and ended up like this. You, as a mother, should be helping the son still struggling in the mud. No matter how his wife tried to stop him, the couple dragged each other and left. Hongbing also took his wife and headed out. Mom, if you really want fairness, you should have only had one child. Why suffer so much? Hongxia cursed him for being an ungrateful wolf, and they argued all the way to the door. I felt drained, as if all my energy had been sucked away, and collapsed on the sofa. Is leaving the inheritance to the sons fair to my two daughters? Every year during the holidays, both sisters buy a lot of things for us. When old Zhao passed, they even bought new clothes that we never wore. We, the old couple, shared everything, including ham and milk, with the two sons, but they never remembered their sisters. All these years, old Zhao and I have been in good health, with only slightly high blood pressure. We never had serious illnesses, nor did we burden our children with caregiving. I've even anticipated that if I ever become paralyzed or bedridden, the two sons will probably refuse to take care of me, as no family wants to shoulder that responsibility. Hongxia brought me a cup of hot water. Mom, I know you don't want to make things difficult for me and Hongyan, but we really don't want to fight over the inheritance. This money won't make us rich, and without it, we won't be poor either. Sis, after today's quarrel, we won't be in a better position either. Hongyan angrily cracked walnuts. Let's find a nurse for Mom these days. No need for those two ungrateful wolves to spend their money. I said no, and both sisters pretended not to hear. Within a few days, I heard people gossiping that Hongxia and Hongyan were trying to please me by dividing the inheritance and making plans for a nurse. Some people advised me, a daughter married off is like water poured out. When you're really unable to move, you'll still need to rely on your sons and daughters-in-law. Don't be so muddled. No one understood why I would leave the inheritance to my two daughters. Only the old sisters who got along well with me could understand. The nurse they found, Deng Ping, was a woman in her 50s, somewhat related to Hongyan's family. She was quick-witted and spoke appropriately. During a casual conversation, I asked about her children. She smiled happily. I have two sons and one daughter, and they're all doing okay. My husband and I can't get used to living in the city, so we live in the countryside, doing some farming. They come to visit when they can. What about your daughter and son-in-law? Don't even mention it. She graduated from university and decided to stay there. My son-in-law is local, and they only come back 2 or 3 times a year. So, are you and your husband planning to stay in the countryside forever? Deng Ping knew about the inheritance issue and sighed. We've lived in the countryside most of our lives. Even if one of us goes first, we still want to stay in the old house. When we can't move anymore, we'll leave it to the children. What else can we do when we're old? Yes, when we're old and can't move, what else can we do? Fairness is something we can't be sure of in the future. I feel like I don't live as clearly as others. After I die, my children can fight over whatever they want, but I won't be able to see or hear any of it. If they end up never speaking to each other again, that's their business, not mine. But I'm stubborn, so I want to clear up these ridiculous issues while I'm still alive. The only thing my children hate about me is the fact that I'm still here. Anyway, I don't have many years left to live, so let them hate me. I went to consult a lawyer about how to write a will, so there are no issues. Thankfully, the land for the house was given to me by my father, and old Zhao always said the land was mine, so the house is in my name. At that time, he even joked, "I don't have anything except my measly salary. I don't have the capital to do anything bad, so I might as well honestly live out my life with you all."
He was a quiet man.
From the time we met until his passing, he never said anything sweet or affectionate. Now that I think about it, that joke became the most heartfelt thing he ever said. When I left the notarization office, I finally felt the heavy burden on my chest lift a little. Before heading home, I went to the hospital. My head had been hurting off and on, and I'd been relying on painkillers to manage it. Whether it's something serious or not, I wanted to know the truth. Brain cancer? If it weren't for the symptoms from a few months ago, I might have thought it was a punishment from heaven. I didn't doubt the test results, but suddenly learning the truth still left me feeling stunned. The doctor spoke very delicately. With advanced medical technology nowadays, your condition is in the middle stage. If you cooperate with the treatment, it's still possible to cure. He advised me to tell my children as soon as possible and to go into the hospital. I didn't even consider surgery. If I'm going to die on the operating table, I'd rather live a few more days while I can still move. I folded the hospital report and tucked it into the inner pocket of my bag. Before heading home, I bought a big carp. Deng Ping makes great fish soup. When Xiao Hai came back for winter break, I picked a day to have the whole family, children and grandchildren, together for a nice meal. After that day, neither of my daughters-in-law came back. Today, though, they came and weren't hiding their displeasure. They helped Deng Ping in the kitchen. "Grandma, I want to come live with you in a couple of days. Mom is controlling me more and more, even asking if I'm dating every time I talk to my friends on the phone," Xiao Hai said, looking helpless. I smiled and said, "If you want to come back, then come. You've grown up. Whatever you do, just remember the word, responsibility." It felt like just the blink of an eye ago that I was standing behind him at the sewing machine, and now he's grown into a young man. The adults' issues shouldn't involve the children. I don't want our conflicts to create psychological stress for them. Xiaowan came over and pouted. "Grandma, I want to live with you too. Ping Ai's cooking is so good, and only when I'm full can I focus on my studies." "Isn't what I cook good?" I pretended to be upset. She lifted her chin, smiling proudly. "I just said Ping Ai's food is delicious, but Grandma's cooking is the best.
I just feel sorry for you.
Otherwise, I'd be eating your food every day." I couldn't help but smile. Ying pulled at my arm. "Grandma, I want to live with you too." I patted her head and smiled. Okay, you all come live with me." Liang came over slowly, looking upset. "I'm your grandson too." I felt a mixture of sweetness and sadness. Of course, how could I forget my little grandson? "Come over, let me see how much taller you've gotten." He jumped up happily, ran over to Xiao Hai, stood on tiptoe to look him over, then counted on his fingers. "In 13 more years, I'll be as tall as cousin, maybe even taller." Xiao Hai told him height is related to genetics and diet. Liang ran to the kitchen to look at his mom, then rushed back to ask Xiao Hai what he should eat to grow taller. Ying, not understanding, also joined in, and the kids were all chattering away. The courtyard, usually quiet, was once again filled with lively chatter and warmth. The kids went back to school, and the yard became quiet again. My headaches were getting more frequent. I really feared that one day, I'd collapse and just lay there for a while before dying. Deng Ping had something to take care of at home, so I bought a plane ticket to Beijing. After landing, I called Hongxia to tell her I wanted to see Tiananmen. She was so anxious. "Mom, why didn't you tell me earlier? You stay at the hotel. I'll book a flight right now." I told her not to worry. "I'll be back tomorrow. Your father used to say he'd bring me to Beijing to see Tiananmen, but he never did. This time, I'll bring him here, and I've got a ticket left for one person. He'll be happy about that." Through the phone, Hongxia was in tears. She felt like she hadn't been filial, because aside from buying things for us and visiting from time to time, she'd never taken us out anywhere. But she had been very filial, and there was no need for her to feel guilty. I didn't call Hongyan. I didn't want to add to her worries, And as for Hongjun and his brothers, whether I told them or not, the outcome would be the same. Standing in Tiananmen Square, I finally felt a deep sense of awe. It felt like I had been transported back to the moment in 1949 when Chairman Mao declared the founding of the People's Republic of China. There were people who helped take photos. I held old Zhao's picture and took several photos with my back to Tiananmen. They were ready in just a few minutes. I had fulfilled my greatest wish and was very content. An old man, about the same age as me, smiled and came over to greet me. "Little sister, are you traveling alone?" I gave him a cold look. My children work in Beijing. I couldn't sit still at home, so I came out for a walk. I knew there were a lot of scammers these days and didn't want to talk too much, but I didn't want to offend him either. "I'm not a scammer," he said cheerfully. "Many tourists who come to Beijing only visit Tiananmen, the Great Wall, and the Forbidden City. They don't know there are many other great places. I know someone who runs tours for retirees, and if you book with my name, you get a 20% discount." I thanked him for his offer, but said I wasn't interested. He didn't give up and continued, mentioning that there were retired old men in the tours who were wealthy and just looking for someone to talk to as a companion. I took the hospital report out of my bag. "Look at this. I've got a malignant tumor in my brain, and I could die at any moment. My son and daughter-in-law are not exactly easy to deal with." At first, he thought I was making it up, but when he saw the report, his expression changed drastically, and he turned around and ran off. I was actually worried he might trip and then come back to blame me. If I had known showing the report would have such an effect, I might have used it with old Huang when he had those intentions. Maybe I wouldn't have had to deal with the daughter-in-law demanding debts. But now that I think about it, it's almost laughable. Even if old Huang wasn't around, the result might have been the same. Knowing I had returned home, Hongxia's heart finally settled. Early the next morning, I bought some flowers and went to the cemetery to visit Lao Zhao. I sat in my spot and spoke to him as if he were still alive. "Old man, in a couple of days, I'll be joining you. I hear that after people die, they have to queue up at the Naiha Bridge, drink the Mingpa soup, and only then can they be reincarnated. Hopefully, it hasn't been your turn yet, so I'll still have a chance to chat with you when I get there." I kept talking without realizing the time passing, reminiscing about everything. I keep telling myself I'm tired, but you're still the same, silent as ever. I still don't know how I managed to spend this life with you. I rubbed my legs, standing up to leave. There would be plenty of time to talk to him in the future. When I got home, Deng Ping had returned. She heard I went to Beijing to see Tiananmen and was full of envy, saying she'd like to go there with her husband one day. Honestly, I envied her. She still had her husband by her side, the energy to work, and when she couldn't anymore, she could gracefully spend her days in the countryside. But I knew she had her own troubles too, though it didn't stop her from living on. I showed her the photos and told her about the old man who tried to trick me into joining a tour group. You should be careful about such things. Stick to the usual places like the subway and buses. Don't get scammed. I didn't mention how I dealt with the man. Deng Ping nodded eagerly. Even though she hadn't been scammed, she still cursed the scammers under her breath. I went to my room to sort through the wardrobe, taking out several clothes I had worn only once or twice, and 2 sets I had never worn. They were bought by Hongxia and the others, and the styles were far from old-fashioned. These clothes are in good condition, barely worn. If you don't mind, you can keep them for when you're working or give them to someone else. When I die, these will be burned. It's better to give them to someone who can use them. I folded up 4 pieces separately, leaving them for my children as a memento. If they didn't want them, they could burn them too. Deng Ping quickly waved her hands. Such nice clothes. How could I take them? You should keep them and wear them. With your health, you could live to be 100. I packed the clothes into a bag. I can't wear that many, and if they're left too long, they'll get ruined. Tomorrow, take them back with you, and by the way, pick up 2 free-range chickens. I'll have Hongxia and the others come over for dinner tomorrow night. After several rounds of insisting, Deng Ping finally smiled and agreed to take the clothes. Hongyan found out I went to Beijing alone and scolded me endlessly. She warned me not to run around without telling anyone and promised to take me to Hainan for a trip once she had vacation time. The two sisters discussed it and even set tentative dates. I felt a lump in my throat and wiped my eyes secretly. After dinner, I saw the two sisters out, waiting until I couldn't see the car lights before turning back inside. My son, I'm sorry to disappoint you. I took a clean bath, changed into my favorite clothes, and placed the letter by the bedside along with the 4 sets of clothes and the hospital report. I hadn't spent much of the money I had saved. There should still be about 30 or 40,000 left after the funeral expenses. This time, I wouldn't let Hong Xia and the others pay. The rest would go to Hong Jun and the other 2 brothers. I had saved up some sleeping pills for a long time, and now they finally had their use. After taking the pills, I hugged Lao Zhao's photo and lay down on the bed, calmly awaiting the end of my life. In this life, whether it was worth it or not, at the end it seemed to matter little. Happiness or not, at the time of death, it all felt the same. This was something we couldn't avoid. I just hope that Hong Xia and Hong Yan won't be too heartbroken. I chose this way to end it myself. It's better than suffering from illness and pain until the very end.